Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised. East of Los Angeles, a calm holiday weekend is shattered by a devastating explosion. A neighborhood is destroyed.
I turned and saw my house totally on fire. All the houses behind me were all on fire.
Where are they? Where are they?
Fiery wreckage is strewn for blocks. Investigators must discover why this airliner crashed and find a way to stop it from ever happening again. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, is one of the busiest in the world. It's used by 40 million passengers each year. More than 1,500 planes take off and land every day. It's August 31st, 1986, Labor Day weekend. Today, a junior air traffic controller, Walter White, will be handling some of that traffic.
That was the big one.
White isn't a full-fledged controller yet. He has to put in more time before he gets his final certification.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Hey, slow.
It was a long weekend, and it was a beautiful day in Los Angeles. It was absolutely clear outside, which we call Chamber of Commerce type day.
You want to take a break? Have a cigarette? I can sit in for you.
Walter wanted to work the sector. As I remember correctly, he wanted to work it for some proficiency time. He hadn't worked it in a while.
ACL 60, can you see the runway 25 left?
Roger, LA approach.
Thank you. Reduce speed to 200, then descend and maintain 6,000.
200, descend and maintain 6,000. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Several hundred kilometers south, in Laredo, Mexico, passengers are boarding an Aeromexico DC-9. Dr. Donald Wong and his sons are returning from a highly successful fishing trip.
Jason, I think we should put it up in the kitchen.
They caught an enormous sailfish,
Your mom would love it.
which they plan to display back home.
Labor Day weekend was the last weekend before school was to start. Donald decided that it would be fun to take the boys fishing down in Mexico, to go deep sea fishing, which he'd only done one other time in his life. This would be a father-son bonding weekend. And it was also the first time that they had traveled without me.
Just east of LA, the suburban city of Cerritos wakes up slowly. In the 1970s, this bustling community had been one of the fastest growing in Los Angeles County.
My husband had been working out of town all week, and he was coming home for the weekend. And that Sunday morning, I decided, let's just stay home, not go to church.
I'm gonna go out and get your favorite things for a good breakfast. Javier, go and take a shower.
And I left to go to the grocery store. In the home was Alex. He was 14. His twin sister, Angelica. She was asleep. He was asleep still. And Javier, that was my 16-year-old, and my husband.
As Estrada leaves on her errand, Aeromexico Flight 498 is just 20 minutes from LA. Captain Antonio Valdez Prom is acting as co-pilot as they approach the city. First Officer Jose Valencia is piloting this leg of their journey.
Ready when you are, Cap.
About 22 kilometers south of LAX sits the Torrance Airport. Operating in the mammoth shadow of LAX, Torrance serves private planes and amateur pilots. It's one of several small airports that operate near LA, a region that has over 6,000 weekend flyers.
Fuel set.
At the end of a busy summer, William Kramer, his daughter Caroline and wife Kathleen are finally taking to the skies.
Piper 4891.
All clear for takeoff. Good morning, Piper 4891. This is Torrance Tower. You're clear for takeoff for runway 5.
They're heading to Big Bear Lake,
Rolling tower.
about 200 kilometers northeast. A meticulous man, William Kramer is an executive for an engineering company. 6 years ago, at the age of 47, Kramer bought his first airplane, a stylish and swift Piper Cherokee. Southeast of LAX, the crew of Aeromexico Flight 498 is still a few minutes from their first contact with air traffic controller Walter White. But in the skies above Los Angeles, a deadly series of events is about to unfold. Dozens of people who have never met will be bound together forever in a tragedy that will affect everyone who flies.
Airspeed.
August 31st, 1986. Labor Day weekend.
All clear for takeoff, Torrance.
Just south of Los Angeles, William Kramer and his family are finally on their way for a long-awaited holiday.
Okay. Just an hour to go, we're in Big Bear Lake.
As the Torrance Airport recedes behind him, Kramer begins climbing to 3,000 meters on his way northeast to Big Bear Lake. Several kilometers away, a half-full DC-9 from Mexico is approaching Los Angeles International Airport.
PSA 1765, 12 o'clock, 1 mile southbound.
It's not a busy morning, and one by one, arrivals controller Walter White guides his planes in safely. At 11:47 a.m., he gets his first call from Aeromexico Flight 498.
Los Angeles approach, good morning. This is Aeromexico 498.
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach. 25 left, final approach course. Do you have information uniform?
The jet is now officially inside what's known as the Terminal Control Area, or TCA. Sometimes referred to as the birdcage, the TCA is a complex piece of three-dimensional airspace around the airport.
It's restricted airspace that's normally found around heavily congested airports or hub airports where the traffic density is extremely high and you need to control the access into and out of that airspace.
As the Aeromexico plane descends, William Kramer and his family continue climbing.
I hope it's like this when we get to Big Bear.
We should be able to see the ocean by now. Hon, take a look at the map and look around the 405 and see if you can see any kind of landmarks that we can use.
Oh, what am I looking for?
This is Aeromexico.
Walter White is keeping his eye on the Aeromexico jet when his attention is abruptly drawn to another plane that's just appeared on his radar. It's not one he's expecting.
One approach, 66 Romeo is on a flight from Fullerton.
Cruising altitude is 4,500. We'd like the following.
The pilot of a small Grumman Tiger asks White to help guide him through the crowded terminal control area. Pilots are supposed to contact LAX approach before they enter the controlled airspace. This pilot could be in the path of incoming jets. But before White can deal with the private plane, he gets a call from the Aeromexico DC-9.
What speed do you want? We're reducing to 290. No, to 190.
Okay, you can hold what you have, sir.
White decides to give the Aeromexico jet the runway closest to their gate.
Change in plan, sir. Stand by.
Roger, 498.
With the DC-9 on hold, White turns to the intruder.
Grumman 66 Romeo, squawk 4524. Remain clear of the TCA.
White tells the pilot of the Grumman to use a unique radio channel. But he seems confused.
4, 5, what were the other two numbers?
4524. Grumman 66 Romeo, are you at 4,500 now?
Negative, we're at 3,400 and climbing.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir. Grumman 66 Romeo, I suggest in future you look at your TCA chart. You just had an aircraft pass right off your left above you at 5,000, and we run a lot of jets right through there at 3,500.
Well, what do you suggest I do now?
As the crew of Aeromexico Flight 498 continue to close in on the
ignition,
airport,
landing lights.
Their DC-9 is rocked by a violent shudder.
There are bugs.
What was that?
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
First Officer Valencia tries desperately to control their dive.
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
This can't be.
A crippled DC-9 falls from the skies over Los Angeles. Fighting to control their jet, the captain and first officer have no idea what's happened to their plane. Air traffic controller Walter White is getting no response from the Aeromexico jet.
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
And now he can't find it on his radar screen.
I'm sitting there talking with the two departure controllers and not really thinking. I hear Walter say something like,
I think I lost one. Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
Where was Aeromexico? At this point, we weren't absolutely sure what had happened.
White calls to an incoming jet for help.
American 333 Heavy. I want you to take a look around at 11 o'clock. I just lost contact with a DC-9. Let me know if you see anything down there, please.
11 o'clock, 5 miles. What altitude?
He was last assigned 6. He's no longer on my radar scope, American 333 Heavy.
Okay, I see a very large smoke screen off on the left side of the aircraft, about 11 o'clock.
I went down the street to go to my house, and I saw a woman's head, that her body had been cut in a diagonal, and she was just laying there. There was nothing but debris and fires sporadically all over the place, and I could see fire in the whole neighborhood.
Nearby, an engine from a local fire station had been on a training exercise, led by Fire Captain Larry Hambleton.
All of a sudden, one of the firemen tapped me on the shoulder and said, "There's a big column of smoke, off to our left." So I picked up the mic and made a guess at the address.
Responding to a large fire north of 91, north of Carmenita.
They came back and said, "Well, we've got a report of an airliner down." So I upgraded the response to basically triple what I initially asked for.
I'm calling for a third alarm and 2 air squads east of 183 in Carmenita.
As we approached, I realized that in addition to the aircraft parts in the street, there were people, body parts, which changed the complexion of the whole thing.
At Los Angeles approach, Walter White, deeply shaken by the crash, is relieved of duty.
I remember watching Walter get up and walk out of the room by himself. And, you know, something inside of me was just, you know, saying, this is not right, this is not right. Somebody's got to go with him.
Tony, he can't go out alone.
I could have been sitting there just as easy as him. And I don't know if I'd have done anything different than he did.
If you're out in this area, you'll see a large plume of white and black smoke, and that's the air crash site about 3 miles west of Fullerton Airport, not far from it.
Helicopter news crews are quickly on the scene.
Using for medevacing.
There was a lot of fire in front of me, and my house was just totally on fire.
Frank! Angelica! Javier! Angelica!
And I saw my neighbor.
Where are they?
I said to her, Rose, where's my family? What happened? And she goes, oh, honey, your family's in here. They're over here. We're looking for you. And within myself, all I could do was thank God that they were safe and sound. She took me into her home, and I saw Alex.
Alex! Alex! What happened? Where's Angelica? Where's Angelica?
I don't know.
Where's Javier? Where's Papa?
I don't know, Mom. I'm sorry.
And he started crying right away and said, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm the only one that came out alive. And all I could do was hug him.
Pieces of fuselage have torn through nearby homes, setting them on fire. The tail section of the jet has been catapulted more than a block from the crash site.
Hello? Is there anybody in here?
As I surveyed the houses and the crash site around me, it was a very surreal experience to stand right there for probably 4 or 5 minutes before anybody else showed up and not see another living soul.
I have got wreckage all over the place. There are no survivors, just fatalities.
You know, I dealt with death on 1 or 2 or 3 people in a residential fire, but never a whole airliner full of people.
Let's go to work, guys.
I don't think I ever saw a whole human being. Gave him the job of finding body parts and wrapping them or covering them with yellow rescue blankets. No matter where it was, ever so small or whatever, you know, a hand or a torso or a leg or whatever. That became life to us. It was treated with respect. My memory of the incident is in a muted shade of brown. It's not black and white, it's not vivid color. You know, the grass isn't green. You know, the houses don't have paint. It's all some muted brown shade. And I'm told that that's my brain's way of taking something violent and horrible and softening it a little bit so I can live with it and deal with it.
The whole corner of this neighborhood has just been torn apart. Yellow sheets mark the bodies. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bodies right now. Oh, gosh. This neighborhood has just been devastated.
16 houses have been damaged, many of them completely destroyed. At Los Angeles International Airport, Mary Wong is waiting for her husband and 2 young sons.
You know, you're thinking, customs might take a little while, but about maybe 12:20 or 12:30, I started seeing a man walk around with a pack on his back with a green cross. We were taken up to a lounge upstairs, and on the elevator up, I looked at the man and I said, "They're dead." I said, "I just know they're gone."
In Cerritos, emergency workers are shocked by another grisly discovery. In the playground of a local school, they find the wreckage of a Piper Cherokee Archer. Remarkably intact, the plane's canopy is sliced off. Its 3 occupants are found still belted into their seats. William Kramer and his family are dead. All the passengers and crew on Aeromexico Flight 498 are also dead. Another 15 people on the ground have been killed. It's a horrifying situation. 2 planes have crashed into a California neighborhood. Something's gone terribly wrong in the skies above one of the busiest airports in the world. Now, investigators have to find out exactly what's happened. On the last day of August in 1986, a lazy Labor Day weekend is shattered by an enormous explosion. Two planes crash in LA County, destroying several homes. It is a grisly scene. Bodies are scattered throughout a devastated neighborhood. 82 people are dead. 15 people on the ground have been killed. Another 67 have died in the tangled wreckage of the 2 planes involved. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board arrive that night. They include experts in human performance, flight systems, and air traffic control. From the beginning, investigators focus on the fact that there are 2 planes on the ground. It suggests a disturbing conclusion that this was a mid-air collision. With that idea in mind, John White and his team must painstakingly examine the wreckage.
It's more of now documenting where the major pieces were and then looking at the pieces to see if you can determine how the aircraft, at what angle the aircraft may have come together at.
Propeller marks on the tail of the DC-9 and paint from the Piper Cherokee reveal how the planes crashed.
It looks like the Piper collided at the tail section of the DC-9.
This can't be.
To piece together the tragedy, investigators examine the DC-9's flight data recorder. It helps them pinpoint the exact location and altitude of Aeromexico Flight 498. The DC-9 was inside the terminal control area, the restricted airspace of the Los Angeles airport. It was right where it was supposed to be. But the Piper Cherokee was also inside the TCA. With all of the jets taking off and landing at LAX, private planes must first get permission to enter this area.
Piper 4891, all clear for takeoff, Torrance.
William Kramer was a newcomer to Los Angeles, but investigators learned that he was well aware of the limits imposed by the TCA. He knew that it was restricted airspace. And in the cockpit of Kramer's Cherokee, the confirmation. Investigators find a map of the terminal control area. Investigators make another puzzling discovery. They learn that Kramer's proposed flight plan took him from Torrance to Long Beach, then up to Ontario, and finally to Big Bear Lake, at a cruising altitude of 3,000 meters. That plan keeps him well out of the TCA.
The fact of the matter is that the Cherokee flew into the TCA and hit the DC-9 in restricted airspace without a clearance.
So how had Kramer flown into danger? And why hadn't he let anyone know? On the ground in Cerritos, one possible answer emerges.
Are you all right, Bill?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Heart disease runs in Kramer's family, and the initial autopsy results show a major blockage. Samples of William Kramer's heart tissue are sent to the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology for testing. If he suffered a heart attack, it might explain why he didn't call in to LA approach.
It's totally possible that he could have had the heart attack, fell back, pulled the airplane up, and that's why he didn't try and avoid the DC-9.
But no matter why Kramer was flying in restricted airspace, air traffic controller Walter White should have been able to see him. Kramer's plane should have appeared on White's radar. Before he's questioned by investigators, White reviews the radio calls from that morning. He needs to be sure of what he said and what he saw. Richard Wentworth was one of the investigators who talked to White.
At any time, did you see the Piper Cherokee on your scope?
No. No, sir. The Piper's target was not displayed. It is my belief that it was not on my radar scope.
He was positive that the aircraft was not there for him to see.
NTSB investigators aren't satisfied with White's memory. While the radar data is being analyzed, news arrives from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology about William Kramer's heart.
Are you all right, Bill?
Yeah. Results from a detailed study of his body show that while he had advanced heart disease, William Kramer was not fighting a heart attack before the collision. Investigators must find another explanation for why the Kramer's flight went into the Los Angeles terminal control area. While he had submitted a flight plan, small planes like Kramer's Cherokee don't have sophisticated instruments. Like most private pilots, Kramer was navigating by landmarks like freeways. That meant keeping an eye both on the landscape below and the airspace around him.
And that's definitely the 405. Where is it again?
New to California, perhaps bewildered by the tangle of freeways below him, Kramer may have flown into the terminal control area without knowing it.
There are no lines on the ground that says the TCA starts here and at this altitude. You have to look at a chart, you have to interpret that.
Investigators are now confident they can explain why Kramer was inside the controlled airspace of the TCA. But when he finally gets a look at the air traffic control radar record, Richard Wentworth is convinced that Walter White should have been able to see the Piper.
We were able to determine that the aircraft that collided with Aeromexico was there to be seen.
So why hadn't White reacted to the Kramer's plane if it was on his radar? When Walter White came to work that day, the arrival station was being controlled by Carl Grundman.
Hey, Carl, how's it going? Hey, slow.
Grundman believes that long-standing radar problems were the reason White didn't see the Kramer's plane.
I can sit in for you.
Controllers have been complaining about the radars for a long time.
Yours, buddy. All right, thanks a lot. Take care.
We had reported problems with the radar not picking up targets several times.
When radar signals strike a target, they bounce back to the receiver. But if buildings or mountains interrupt the radar, the return signal can disappear.
A blind spot is only an instantaneous thing. It's not a continuous thing.
I think I lost one.
There were also holes that were just because the radar was old. It was just not as accurate as it might have been. It was not state-of-the-art equipment, that's for darn sure.
We reviewed that data. We had no evidence that there were any malfunctions of any systems in Los Angeles.
There is another possible explanation. If the Cherokee had appeared on the radar, White still could have missed it. Investigators focus on the other plane in the sky that day, the Grumman Tiger. Private planes are required to contact air traffic control if they are entering the terminal control area. But the Tiger was already deep into the TCA before it radioed Walter White.
One approach, 66 Romeo is on a flight from Fullerton.
Cruising altitude is 4,500. We'd like following.
Grumman 66 Romeo, are you at 4,500 now?
Negative. We're at 3,400
and climbing.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir.
There was an aircraft that was east of the airport which he became involved in. That was what they called a violator.
Grumman 66 Romeo, I
suggest in future you look at your TCA chart. You just had an aircraft pass.
The problem with the conversation between the controller and the pilot of the Grumman is that it went on too long.
Why were you so mesmerized by the Grumman?
I thought he posed a risk.
This occurred during a critical time at which the two aircraft to the southwest of his display, which was the Aeromexico and the Cherokee, were merging.
But even if the Cherokee's signal did appear on White's radar, and even if he had seen it, investigators discover that White still would not have had all the information he needed. Radar signals only show controllers that a plane is in range. Transponders on planes can broadcast other information, including height and speed. But at the site of the Cherokee wreckage, investigators discover the plane's transponder is a basic model. It only sends out information on the plane's direction. It provides no information about the plane's altitude.
So these controllers were pretty much used to seeing a little triangle which represented a VFR aircraft with no altitude readout traversing all over the place. And unless they learned firsthand from the pilot, they had an expectation that the aircraft would not intrude into that airspace.
Grumman 66 Romeo, squawk 45.
Investigators believe that White's divided attention perhaps made worse by an older radar system, explains why he never warned the DC-9 of the danger posed by Kramer's Cherokee.
Find any landmarks that we might be able to use as a visual.
But there's another mystery that hasn't been solved. Studying the radar records from the day, NTSB investigators are startled by what they find. Neither the crew of the DC-9 nor the pilot of the smaller Cherokee took any evasive action before the crash. Both pilots appear completely unaware of each other.
Definitely the 405.
Why hadn't the pilots of either airplane reacted? Visibility was over 20 kilometers. How could two planes collide in the clear blue sky? A terrifying mid-air collision over a Los Angeles suburb takes the lives of 82 people. The day of the disaster, the sky was clear. A major question in the investigation has become, why didn't the two planes take action to avoid the collision? The radar information paints a puzzling picture. It indicates that for more than a minute, the Kramer's Cherokee was there to be seen by the Aeromexico crew. And if the Kramers had looked out their right side window, they would also have seen the Aeromexico jet. But neither plane altered its course. Neither plane took any action to avoid the deadly collision. Investigators believe that if William Kramer was indeed lost and using the highways as a guide, he might never have seen the approaching DC-9. The window he would have been looking out was the pilot's window, but the DC-9 was coming from the other direction. For the crew of the DC-9, the very size of the much smaller Cherokee could have prevented them from seeing the plane before it was too late.
In some cases, when the small aircraft is closing very rapidly, by the time the aircraft becomes large enough for you to easily see it, it's almost too late to avoid the collision.
The design of the cockpit windshield may also have contributed to the disaster.
It's possible that during part of the approach, at least for one of the pilots, the aircraft was actually behind the center post, and unless the pilot moved his head back and forth to clear that airspace, unless he had a reason to do that, it's possible the aircraft was obscured during part of the time in which he might have had a chance of seeing the other aircraft.
Ignition.
The disaster over Cerritos revealed several tragic weaknesses in the air traffic control system. One of the most glaring was that pilots could not be relied on to see and avoid each other. They'd need new technology to keep a mid-air collision from happening again. A small California neighborhood is rocked by a terrifying plane crash. "82 people are killed when a private plane slams into a large passenger jet. The devastation is enormous. More than a dozen homes are damaged, several leveled completely. The NTSB accident report makes it clear that there are glaring problems across the air traffic system, and these concerns must be addressed before, inevitably, there is another mid-air disaster. The FAA, which regulates the airline industry in the United States, acted swiftly to improve safety around major airports. A new kind of transponder was required for smaller planes, the kind that might have helped air traffic controllers recognize that the private aircraft posed a danger.
If you had an aircraft that flew under a controlled airspace, you would have a transponder and you would be required to have altitude encoding or reporting. That way it would be no mistake as to whether you had an intruder or not.
A new system called Mode C Intruder was also developed to warn air traffic controllers.
Mode C Intruder is an automated program that is now incorporated in all our major radar facilities, that if an aircraft should inadvertently intrude, the controller will now be given a visual and an oral alert, thus giving him time to provide a timely warning to the pilot.
Check. Seatbelts, engine ignition.
Even for the most diligent pilot, the old strategy of see and avoid had serious limitations. Those limitations would be addressed by the most important innovation of all.
The major technological innovation that came out of the Cerritos midair was the congressional mandate that all air carrier aircraft operating within the United States would be outfitted with TCAS, Traffic Collision and Avoidance System.
John Andrews worked on the team that developed TCAS.
The TCAS collision avoidance system, which was under development, quite possibly could have prevented this accident. TCAS gives the pilot a traffic advisory at 45 seconds before the potential collision.
Hey, Maria. Everything okay back there?
And then at approximately 25 seconds or so before the potential collision, a resolution advisory is given to actually tell the pilots to climb or descend to avoid the altitude of the other aircraft.
See.
Today, commercial airlines around the world use TCAS. The pilot of the Grumman Tiger, the so-called third pilot, whose actions may have played a part in the crash, was eventually charged for flying into controlled airspace in a careless and reckless manner. For Walter White, the effect of the disaster over Cerritos could not be overcome.
Walter came back to the TRACON, and I think it was probably a month or so later. And I can't give you exactly how long he stayed there, but it wasn't very long. And he just got up and said, no, thank you. And as far as I know, he didn't talk to airplanes again.
Within a year of the incident, the old radars at LAX were replaced. In Cerritos, a memorial garden now marks the day of the disaster. Mary Wong has since remarried, but the pain of returning home that day will never go away.
There's nobody here. The house is empty. Derek was already living in an apartment in San Diego, and here I was no longer a mother, except to Derek, and I was no longer a wife. And so it shattered my whole world.
Days after the disaster, Mary Wong found one of the few people who could fully understand her loss.
I went to the memorial service, and it was very important to me to try to meet somebody else who had gone through this. And I knew from reading stories that Teresa had lost her husband and 2 children. And so I saw someone there who I thought was Teresa.
She says, "Are you Teresa Estrada?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "Well, my name is Mary Wong." And she says,
I said, "I lost my husband and children also."
I just wanted to grab her and hug her because she was feeling what I was feeling.
So we had an immediate connection, and we've maintained our friendship over these 20 years.
Everyone who flies today has been affected by the mid-air collision over Cerritos. The disaster led to historic improvements in aviation safety. Since the full adoption of TCAS, there has not been another mid-air collision in North America.